The airplane just would not hold altitude anymore. Anytime he tried to hold altitude, he'd feel that little stall buffet. So basically, we're just slowly coming down and down and down.
Episode 86 of the Pilot the Pilot podcast takes off now. What is going on, Aviation, and welcome back to the Pilot podcast. My name is Justin Seams, and I am your host. Today is exciting. I am re-releasing an episode with Logan Flood. Logan is a plane crash survivor. He has suffered tons of burns all over his body. It has kind of really affected him in his aviation career, and this episode really truly chronicles what it was like to go from plane crash to now first officer at Southwest Airlines. So listen to this episode. You'll truly enjoy it. It's a great story. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review on iTunes. We are 2 reviews away from 400 reviews. That is truly incredible. I can't even believe that it's going to be up to 400. So thank you so much for reviewing the podcast. Thank you for listening to the podcast. And if you like the podcast, please consider supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/pilotthepilot. And you can check out our Instagram page at pilotthepilot or our website, pilotthepilothq.com. Avination, I don't want to keep you any longer. Here is the re-release with Logan Flood. Hey, Logan, thanks for coming on the Pilot the Pilot podcast.
Hey, thanks for bringing me on, man.
No problem. I'm really excited to have you on. First question I ask everyone is, why did you become a pilot? What was the original inspiration behind you wanting to be a pilot?
Well, originally, growing up as a kid of the 80s, I grew up as a big science fiction geek. I was, growing up 5 years old, I was a Star Wars geek. I love Star Wars, love Star Trek. I wanted to be an astronaut. I really wanted to fly a spaceship. Didn't care about the science aspect of doing experiments in space. I just wanted to drive the ship. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be Han Solo. My dad was an over-the-road truck driver, and I just kind of I wanted to take what he did up to the next level. I wanted to be a Starship cargo pilot as a kid. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be Han Solo, flying my own freighter.
That's awesome.
Making my own. My dad owned his own truck, so he was his own boss. He would basically sell his truck and trailer out to different food carriers, and he would haul food cross country all the time. And it's like, that'd be so awesome. I have my own spaceship. I can go fly around. Obviously, that didn't really happen. So growing up in very, very small town Nebraska, and as you've shown on Instagram, you spent some time out in the quality of life of Hastings, Nebraska.
Oh my gosh, yes, I have.
So I grew up in a very small town. So Hastings is not a small town. Hastings is actually a big city compared to the town I grew up in. I grew up in a town just about 5 miles to the southeast of Hastings called Trumbull, Nebraska.
Okay.
And that town has a population of 200 people.
Oh, wow.
That town only exists for the farmers' co-op. The railroad goes through there. There's a big grain elevator there. Basically, everyone who lived there was basically farmers or worked in Hastings. They just wanted to get out of the city life.
They wanted to get out of the big city of Hastings.
Yes. So that's the whole purpose of Trumbull, Nebraska. Anyways, growing up there, being that the town is literally just surrounded by cornfield, basically a quarter mile each direction, you're going to ride my bike into a cornfield. There was always crop dusters, and I would always ride my bike out to the edge of the road and watch these crop dusters come in low and then pull up hard, bank out. I just love that. It's like that's what I want to do. That looks just like Luke Skywalker flying his X-wing fighter low to the ground. I wanted to be that guy. So in small town Nebraska, this is in the 1980s. There's no such thing as internet, and such a small town, no one really knows any pilots or how to get into flying at all.
Right.
The rule of the law, at least that was in small town Nebraska, the only way you're going to become a pilot is if you go to the Air Force. That was kind of the thought mentality back then, at least in my neck of the woods. The only way you can become a pilot is if you go to the Air Force. So, unfortunately, I inherited my mother's eyes. I have very poor vision. It requires extensive correction just for me to see 20/20. And right then and there, that discounted me for going in the Air Force. I thought, well, shoot, I'm not going to be a pilot now because I got really bad eyesight because I can't join the Air Force now. Or I can still join the Air Force, just won't be able to be a pilot. And that's what I really wanted. So I kind of gave up my dream of flying then at that point because I thought, well, gosh, I got to be an Air Force pilot to even become a pilot. And my bad vision keeps me from doing that. So I've kind of chose a second career path. I thought I was going to be in law enforcement. I thought that's what I was going to do. But I still had that urge for flying as a kid. As I went into high school in the early 90s, 91, 92, I still had that bug really bad for flying. So what I would do is I got to be really good with computers, and I started flying around. Microsoft Flight Sim 5.0 was the big hit back then. Paid $200 for a 4 meg upgrade for my old 46 Packard Bell so I could run it on high res graphics on this flight sim.
That's
and I'd
awesome.
take off on MiGs. You know how Microsoft Flight Sim always started you off at MiGs airfield.
Yeah.
And I take a Learjet, and I would take my dad, and I had no access to sectional charts or any type of aviation charts, but I got to practice with my dad's old Rand McNally road charts, his highway maps. And what I would do is I would take a protractor and try to draw as best I could magnetic north off of Chicago. And I would take that protractor and draw a line out to, say, LAX or San Francisco. And I would try to best as possible compute a magnetic heading off of that. And I would do it in Flight Sim. Then I would take off and fly that heading. And I would learn how to do VORs off of that.
That's
I need
crazy.
to back up a little. I got to back up a little bit. I had no ties to aviation growing up. I'm the first pilot of the family.
Yeah.
Apparently, from what my dad has told me, my grandfather, he always wanted to learn how to fly. My grandfather was a dentist in a small town in Nebraska, and he always wanted to learn how to fly, but his wife would never let him. She thought it was too dangerous, too expensive. But he always had the passion for it. He actually bought all the study aids. He built remote-controlled airplanes. He died about a year before I was even born, so I never even got to meet him.
Okay.
But my dad showed me all the stuff that he had, showed me the books he had. So I dug into his textbook, and it was like a 1960s Jeppesen private pilot handbook. It was really cool in retrospect.
That is awesome.
I still have it. It's a really cool textbook. But it taught me, because VORs were like the cutting edge then, and so it talks about VORs and how to use them. So I transferred that knowledge into Flight Sim. So here I am flying this Learjet, and while shopping one day in Goodwill, I came across a AOPA airport book that shows every airport and all the FBOs you can buy gas at. It was like from 1991, 92. And on those airports, it also lists VOR frequencies if there's a VOR on the field. So Flight Sim has all those. So as I'm navigating across the country just off my dead reckoning protractor compass heading, I figure if I fly this heading long enough, I'm going to probably be able to tune into some of these VORs. And sure enough, I tune into Denver's VOR, and I run a protractor off my road map and off the radio off. I'm getting on Flight Sim, find out I'm actually relatively on course. And I'm not simulating any winds or fuel burn. I just want to see testing my navigation skills. And eventually I do it. I'm finally able to tune into VOR of LAX, and I fly right into LAX.
That's crazy. Awesome. That's so cool. So it's cool to see that the sim geeks out there and the people that just love flying and are young or not even young, just want to get into flying. Flight Simulator can give you kind of an understanding of what it's like to be a pilot. Now, it can't supplement actually flying an airplane, but it can help you. If you enjoy doing Flight Simulator, the chances are you're probably going to enjoy flying an actual airplane.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Especially if you go to how far you went, to where you took a protractor and a road map and figured out where you were and how far away you were from your destination.
Yeah, exactly. So I did that in high school, and all this time while I was during high school, I was working at the hardware department at the local Sears. And, of course, back then, everyone was allowed to write checks. And of course, if someone wrote a check, you got to ask to see their ID. This one guy comes in, he buys a bunch of tools, and he's paying with the check. And so I ask, hey, did you see your ID? And he jokingly says, how about my pilot's license? How do you know there's a pilot in the room? Don't worry, he'll tell you.
Yeah, that's the truth.
That's what this guy did. But this guy had glasses that were thicker than mine. And I'm like, hey, you got your pilot's license, but you got glasses, and I thought you had I always thought you had to have perfect vision. He's like, oh no, you get a waiver, he's in this, and he showed me his medical, he showed me his waiver. I'm like, holy crap, maybe I need to look into this a bit more. So it's around 1994, and I start thinking really serious, like, I got to find a way to start flying. So I started doing some research. And again, this is the 90s. There's no such thing as internet just yet. AOL was just starting to come up. But I lived out in rural Nebraska. My best high-speed internet was 2400 baud rate. My computer had a 56K modem in it, but I'm in rural Nebraska. The phone lines haven't been messed with since the 1940s.
Oh no!
So yeah, 2400 baud rate's the best I'm getting for my dial-up speed. So internet's out for me. I can at least get on the computers at the school, and even then, though, the speed on the computers at the school aren't that good. So I talked to my business teacher, and senior year, the business class is allowed to do an internship at wherever they want to go do an internship at. And I got to hand it to my business teacher. She's the one that really put in, she really kind of was my weather vane. She guided me to where I needed to go to find out about flying. So while she's setting up these internships, other guys in my class, you got the people that want to be an accountant. They're going to go do an internship at an accounting firm. You got the paralegals doing law firms. And you got the medical people doing CNA stuff. I wanted to be a pilot. So she had no idea, but she went out and found a internship for me. She drove out to the airport and asked all these different businesses, all these FBOs. One FBO laughed her out the door, like,
wow.
Whatever. But she went to this one FBO, the FBO next door, and they're like, yeah, we'll let them, we'll show them around. So I did an internship my senior year of high school, being a lineman, pumping gas into airplanes.
That's awesome.
And I loved it. I ate it up. It was so cool. Eventually, I kind of got mentored by the line manager, who was also an aspiring pilot. He was earning his CFI, and he was getting ready to start doing giving flying lessons. And sure enough, as I was working out this internship, they saw my enthusiasm. They offered me a full-time job that summer right out of high school. They're like, hey, we want you to stay working out here.
No way.
And
that's
I
really
loved
cool.
it. I told Sears, see ya, I got my dream job now. And I loved it. I took a huge pay cut because I was actually making good money for a high schooler out in Sears, but I was pumping gas into airplanes, and I was learning so much about airplanes. We'd have jets come through, and I loved it, ate it up.
Yeah. Was this the Hastings Airport?
No, this was Grand Island.
Okay.
It was Grand Island. That's where
so you drove a good distance to get there then, didn't you?
Yeah. Back up a little bit there. We actually moved to another small farm town in between Grand Island and Hastings. So
okay.
I grew up in Trumbull, but then eventually we moved to a town called Wood River, which is right between Grand Island and Kearney, but still in that same Tri-City area. There's nothing out there.
Yeah, so it wasn't as bad.
So I was driving from Wood River to Grand Island and going out to work out there at the airport. And sure enough, the line manager, they would ask him to go do test flights or ferry flights on airplanes, and he would take me along with him, and he would let me fly. And before I knew it, that summer, after I graduated high school in 96, that summer, I started right away in my private pilot flying lessons. Basically, I was pumping gas and then taking that paycheck and just renting the airplane,
nice.
Right away. And
yeah, just going straight back into your flying lessons, right?
Yeah. And basically at the time, my guidance counselor there at the high school, he had found out that UND had a good aviation program. We didn't have any information about Embry-Riddle or anything like that, but he came across UND, and UND sent me a ton of stuff about their aviation program, and I debated on going out there. It looked awesome. But there was the cost. It was just like, gosh, I don't know if I can really afford that. And so I think I'll try to stay at the University of Nebraska. And so while interning at the FBO, now working out there full time in the summer, the mine manager, he pointed me towards the University of Nebraska at Kearney, and that's where he did his aviation degree. They had a 4-year degree called Aircraft Systems Management, was a 4-year degree for a professional pilot, and looked into it. And sure enough, I enrolled right away.
That's awesome.
And they offer a 4-year degree, and you come out with all of your ratings plus it's a bachelor's degree in aircraft systems. And so I went ahead and did my private on my own that summer, just so I could start my freshman year with my private already in my pocket. And you test out if you show up to the university with any of those ratings, they'll give you credit for it, and they'll just have you test out of it. So I already tested out my private right away the first start of the semester, and started my 4-year degree and all my flying lessons there at Kearney, which is, so Wood River is right in between Grand Island and Kearney. What I would do is, to save money for flight training, I elected to stay living at my parents' house. I lived in their basement, so there's no shame in it when you're trying to build an aviation career, as expensive it is. And
Definitely not. Yeah.
And it was in 1990s, compared to today's dollars, I got off cheap for the flight training. Today it's just astronomical through the roof. But back then, I was renting airplanes for $35 an hour, and add another and then add another $15 instructor. So I'm paying roughly $50 an hour to go do my commercial ratings. So I was living at my parents' house. I would drive from Wood River to Kearney, which is a good 45-minute drive for class. I get all your general studies, and then you start doing your electives, physics, civics, all those other fun, general ed classes there at the university. But then we start doing the really fun classes. We did aviation law, did air traffic control, human factors in aviation, all sorts of great aviation courses. And I kept all my textbooks. I loved those classes. But then I would drive we would do all the flight training out there in Kearney at the airport, but I also still had the lineman job out in Grand Island. So what I would do is I would drive then from Kearney to Grand Island to go work my shift at the FBO in Grand Island, which is another hour drive the opposite direction.
Oh, wow.
And I spent a lot of years on the road driving to and from airports. But I loved my lineman job. I loved pumping gas at night. And that kind of segues into how my career even advanced from there. Is I met while pumping gas there at Grand Island, there's a company in Omaha, Suburban Air Freight, Sub Air. I don't know if are they even still out there in Omaha? I haven't even looked recently.
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. You might have seen their airplanes. I think they're still out there. Anyways, they used to fly these Aero Commanders, and they would come in twice a night. One would be coming from Omaha, land in Grand Island, drop off some mail, pick up some gas, and then go on out to Alliance, Nebraska, out in the panhandle of the state.
Yeah.
And then an hour later, the one coming from Alliance going to Omaha would come through. So 2 times a night, 11:30 and 12:30, the FBO manager would pay me an extra $25 to come out in the middle of the night and gas up these 2 airplanes and call it a night. While doing this, one of the pilots that worked for them started chatting me up, and he realized I was an aspiring pilot. And his thing was he loved mentoring guys my age, how to, get a career in aviation. He really took it upon himself because he realized that out in the boonies of Nebraska, it's really hard to get your foot in the door. So flying through, he would recognize youths that were, really trying to put forth an effort to make a career. He'd guide them. And as I was chatting with him, he basically would bring it up to me that this flying gig that he had was only his part-time job. His full-time job was a corporate pilot there in Omaha. And he just volunteered to work extra for Sub Air on his days off because it might be a downtime with his corporate gig. And what he flew was 400 series Cessnas. He had a 414 and a 421 that he flew for.
Oh, wow.
So visiting with him while pumping gas, he would say, "Hey, I got a trip next week. Drive up to Omaha and we'll go fly this trip together." And that's exactly what I did. And that's kind of how I start my flying career as getting exposed to corporate flying, putting on the suit and, actually taking care of the passengers and flying into all these different small airports, taking these business people to meetings and whatnot. And it was fun. And he loved it. He called it, it's like, hey, the airline life is a bus driver. I'm a limo driver. I drive these corporate guys around.
Yeah.
That's how he would explain it. And so he was my next step. He became my biggest mentor in my flying career.
It's cool that you say that because there's so many pilots that just want to help other pilots out. And one of the best jobs you can do is just anything at an airport. Just go fuel planes, just go talk to people, just go walk around. Everyone wants to talk aviation. You will see that, that's part of this podcast, is that it's so easy to talk to people because we just have a common interest and we can all talk about it for hours or days. So just go work in an airport, go fuel planes, and you will find people and you will meet the right people that help you further pursue your career.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's all about networking. That's for sure. So yeah, that was kind of how I really came up into flying as a kind of pull myself up by the bootstraps, is from nowhere, Nebraska, to captain at a regional airline today.
That's awesome. What was the process from going from, so you were a commercial pilot, what jobs did you get to help build your hours to get at a regional airline?
Well, after college, my mentor from Omaha, he recommended I start flight instructing full time in Lincoln, just because the student pool was just that much larger out in Lincoln, Nebraska. So after college, I then moved to Lincoln and started flying for an FBO I was a full service FBO there in Lincoln, Nebraska. They did charter, maintenance, avionics, and flight instruction. So started flight instruction there, summer of 2000. I just graduated college. I have roughly 600 hours of flying time in my logbook at this point. And back in 2000, regionals weren't even looking at people to be competitive. You needed at least the magic 2002 is what we all called it. 2,000 hours total time with 200 hours of multi, the magic 2002. So everyone was struggling to get that 2002. And this was the summer of 2000, just after I graduated. So you just plug away. I was plugging away every day, flight instructing. I was flight instructing pretty hard that summer. There were some days where I'd put in a good 7-8 hours in my logbook, and then of course some days not so much because of weather and whatnot. But the student pool is large enough you could fly as much as you wanted to. And then of course the mentor in Omaha, he would still let me do right seat flying with him and log a few hours here and there of multi time, that precious multi time. But the charter department, and this kind of segues into my accident. My mentor, his name was Dick Smith, and he's dead and gone. He died of cancer just a couple of years ago, and it was really kind of sad. But he had another protege, and his name was Raja. He was from Singapore, and Dick took Raja under his wings, and Raja was his pride and joy. I'm trying to think the best way to describe Raja. Basically, Raja was Dick's greatest protege because he loved flying so much that Raja's enthusiasm for flying just infected you. He didn't instruct just to build hours. He instructed because he wanted to instruct.
Right.
But he also had dreams of flying bigger stuff. He had huge aviation career aspirations, but he didn't make light of flight instructing at all. And the students loved him for it. The chief pilots loved him for it. Everybody thought Raja was amazing, and it showed. Raja was an extremely humble person. So Dick Smith helped me get the job at Silver Aviation, but Raja was already there, and Raja was thriving. And that's when Dick had said, "Logan, get to Silverhawk, start flying there." Well, Raja had been there so long already that the chief pilots at Silverhawk at the time recognized Raja's potential. And they put Raja right away into the charter department. And so Raja was flying charters in the Baron 58. He was flying stuff in the 340 and the 414. And
some awesome equipment.
Yeah, great equipment. And eventually now, after a summer of flight instructing nonstop, come around the wintertime, I finally had gotten myself back up. I was close to around 1,100 hours by January of 2001. And I let the chief pilot know that. It's like, hey, I'm getting close to 1,200 hours. And that was what they wanted you to have to start flying the 135 stuff, is 1,200 hours. So they go, okay, here's what we're going to do is we want to move Raja up into the turbine airplanes. They had King Airs and they had Citations there. It's like, we're going to move Raja up to those airplanes. So we want you to start doing the Baron flying when you hit your 1,200 hours. So here's what we want you to do. We want you to start flying with Raja on every Baron trip. And if that plane's empty, we want you flying in the left seat and building time in that airplane. And we had the Silverhawk was a air ambulance operation as well. We did normal charters, but they did fixed wing air ambulance operations as well in a King Air. And we had a weekly morning, every Wednesday morning at 5:30 in the morning, we'd take this Baron and we'd take it to north central Nebraska. We'd take it up to Valentine, Nebraska, and we'd be delivering these radioactive isotopes to a heart hospital there. And because the drive was like a 6-hour drive, but we could do it in the Barren in an hour.
Yeah.
So every Wednesday morning, that was Raj's bread and butter. That was Raj's gig. And Raja was getting tired of it, of course, and they wanted Raja to go fly the other airplanes. So they said, okay, hey, guess what? We're going to have you start doing that Barren run once you get the 1,200 hours. So in the meantime, fly with Raja every Wednesday morning, because when you dump that cargo, you fly the airplane back under Part 91, and you're going to be in the left seat, and you're going to build that time in that airplane. It might be an hour, one a week, but hey, you're at least getting that extra hour in the Barren multi-time PIC. So that's what we were doing. And I did that several times with Raj that summer. And Raj was very thorough, very professional. And there was a few times where I go with Raj and we go into Valentine and the weather would be too low, because the town of Valentine, the only approach that you get in there was an NDB approach. That's all that they had. And this is before the airplane had, this is 2000, winter of 2001. The airplane had just basic avionics. It didn't have GPS. It had a LORAN, but there's no LORAN approaches. You could use the LORAN for navigation, but to get down into the airport, you had to shoot a full-on NDB approach. And if the weather's low, you're not getting in. And we turn around, come right back to Lincoln, and no one would say a word. Never got pressure like, oh, you should have flown low or anything like that.
Right.
They just accepted it. Like, yep, you didn't get in. Oh well, that sucks. They never had pressure on us to go. So that's one thing I loved about Silverhawk Aviation, is the management there was great. But finally, eventually, on February 7th, 2001, again, I'm flying with Raja. He had just come back from spending a month home at Singapore. That's where he was from originally, was Singapore. Mm-hmm. And he had just come back. This was his first trip back, and I'm flying with him again. And it's IFR. It's really ironic, because I normally, at the time when I was building those hours, I'd only update my logbook like once a week. But for some reason, that day, that Tuesday, February 6th, I had updated my logbook that night, and I'd flown like 6 hours that day. The weather was gorgeous. It was like 65 degrees, gorgeous, severe, clear day. And now the next day, it's IFR, it's cold. So obviously we're anticipating getting icing in this Barren 58. So the airplane, it didn't have a hot plate for a de-icer. It had just an alcohol tank that would spray alcohol on the window and props to clear the ice off. Mm. And it had boots. So we knew we anticipated of getting ice. We were planning on kicking it off. And that's exactly what we did. We took off. There was a winter storm forecasted to come through the following evening into the next day on Thursday. But you could tell the weather was starting to kind of come in a little bit. Like I said, low ceilings, cold weather. But there were other guys. There was a couple of 340 and the 414 pilots. They were getting ready to do a charter as well in that general direction that we were going. And they thought, yeah, the weather's going to be crappy tomorrow, that's for sure, but we're going to get this trip done today. So Raj and I, we blast off out of Lincoln, and we're picking up light ice the whole way there, and we're kicking it off their boots. We change altitudes, climb higher to get out of the ice. Raj is, I had no reason to doubt Raj's judgments. Raja knew the airplane way more than I did. I'm still green behind the ears. Here I am with just right at around 1,200 hours now, and barely 50 hours of multi-time. And we're kicking off the ice of the boots, and the airplane, the Barren 58, is not certified for flight in known icing conditions, so we're doing our best to stay out of it. We climb altitudes, but we're still picking it up here and there.
Right.
But what really hurt us was the window was constantly building ice, but we had the alcohol system, but you don't dare use that until you get on an instrument approach. So that way the ice is off the window in time for you to make a landing and doesn't build back up. You really only, it's like a one and done type of deal.
Yeah.
So we let the ice continually build on the window until we know we're going to come into land. But we keep the heater on the airplane, and Raj asked me to crawl into the back and make sure all the gaspers are closed, so we have all the hot air blowing up onto the window just to minimize the ice buildup on there. So we're flying along, and we're getting close to Valentine, and we're able to tune in the ASOS, and the ASOS is all of a sudden reporting freezing rain. Oh, and no. Raja shakes his head. Nope. We're not going there. So we turn the airplane around, and there's an airport literally we're almost just practically over. It's Ainsworth, Nebraska. And we immediately tune over to the ASOS for the Ainsworth Airport. And it's reporting, it was marginal VFR. It was like 3,000, 4,000 some overcast, 5 miles mist, but no freezing precipitation yet. And so we ask the center, hey, can we get vectored onto VOR approach in the Ainsworth? We're going to land and take a look at this weather some more. So we're starting to get vectored on this VOR approach, and center loses radar contact with us just because radar coverage in that part of the state at that altitude is shoddy at best. So now we've lost radar contact, so that means we got to do a full published approach now. So we're going to go outbound on the VOR radial, which is on the field. The VOR is on the field. The approach course lines you up the runway. But we got to go outbound now. We do the procedure turn. And as we're doing the procedure turn, now's the time when we kick on the alcohol. So we kick on the alcohol to clean off the window. And we had noticed earlier that was taking more and more power to maintain our current airspeed. So we know we're definitely icing up on the unprotected surfaces now, because it's just taking more. We're getting the more drag out there all the time. And so we're on the procedure turn. We've got the alcohol on, and it's working. We can see the fluid is draining past the side of the windows. And the tank goes from full to empty in a matter of seconds. It doesn't take long at all for that pump to pump out all that alcohol out. And it runs dry. We run it dry, and not a single piece of ice comes out the forward window. We're completely blind. So we're flying this approach. We're getting established inbound, and we still have the ASOS tuned to the number 2 radio just to hear if there's any change. And sure enough, it starts reporting freezing rain now. So we know we're in trouble. This is not where we've gotten ourselves into a situation now that we have no room to get out of. So we're shooting the VR approach, and we descend down to the MDA, and we break out of the clouds. We can see out the side windows, and it's still dark. It's early in the morning enough to where it's still completely dark, but we can see the ground. We can see farmhouses. So all is not lost. But we can't see forward. That's the only problem. We can't see forward. So our faces are pressed against the side of the windows. We debate, hey, should we maybe kick the rudder a little bit? And we kind of go, with the way the ice is building on the airplane, we don't know what's going to happen if we try to kick that rudder to see out the side a little bit better. So we maintain the course, flying the VOR inbound, and the needle does the flip on us. We just flew right over the VOR. And out the side of the window, we see the runway going by underneath us. So we knew well enough that we can't do a missed approach. We know we're in serious trouble now. So we know the airport's terrain. There's it's Nebraska. There's no mountains. There's no obstructions at all around this airport. So we stay at the MDA and we circle back around, and we get a good view of the runway out Raj's window at the left, and we make basically left-hand traffic at the MDA circling the field trying to get down. And we get a beam the numbers, and we're trying to make a base lay. We're going to try to get lined up that needle again and try to land on that runway and hope we land on it. And right then, as we get a beam the numbers, the airplane just gives the slightest little stall buffet. Not a full stall, just enough to let you know that it's not going to stay flying much longer. And Raja instinctively knew what was happening, and he had everything firewalled as best he could, and the airplane just would not hold altitude anymore. Anytime he tried to hold altitude, he'd feel that little stall buffet. So basically, we're just slowly coming down and down and down. We never hit a full stall, but she was coming down, and we ended up crashing just a quarter mile north of the runway, and a slight left wing low attitude. And the airplane literally exploded on impact. I had woke up when I got knocked out when the airplane hit the ground and exploded. When I came to, finally, when I woke up, well, actually, I got back up. My first conscious thought, the last sound I heard was the props digging the dirt. I just remember hearing the props hitting the dirt, just tons of ruckus and noise like crazy. And my last conscious thought was, man, our chief pilot's going to be so pissed. Yeah. that was my last conscious thought. Well, that and also, that first stall shutter, I said a little quick private prayer. I thought I was goner. I thought this is it. But please make this quick and painless is how I kind of said a quick little prayer. But at the same time, I still thought, oh my God, because I remember hearing the props digging the dirt. It's like, hey, we hit the ground and I'm still alive. Man, our chief pilot's going to be so upset. But then I got quickly knocked out. When I woke up, I was actually still strapped to my seat, but I was in the back of the airplane. My seat had broken off the rails. I was laying sideways. I was laying sideways in the back of this Baron, still strapped to my chair, and there was fire crackling out in the wingtips. There was no fire in the cabin at that time, but my vision was extremely blurred, and I could hear fire crackling out in the wingtips. So my seat is lodged sideways in the back of the airplane, and I eventually crawl up, the seat still strapped to me, up towards the front of the airplane, and the door, on the Baron 58, the door's on the right-hand side. It was gone. There's no door there. So I basically fall out the side and roll down the wing, still strapped in my chair, and finally I'm finally able to undo the seatbelt and get the seat off of me. And I stand up and I just look around, and the airplane's on fire. There's a trail of fire. The field that we landed in, just north of the runway, was a plowed cornfield. There's like all these broken corn stalks in the field, and we left like a twin trail of fire through this field. And then I slowly realized that Raja is still sitting there in the airplane. So I get back up and I try to get him out of the cockpit. And now the fire that was on the wingtips, now the airplane's sitting there, the wings are broken. It's just feeling that fire that's getting really bad.
Yeah.
I got to get away from it because I'm thinking this thing's going to blow up with me standing underneath it. The Ainsworth Airport, it's an uncontrolled airport. There's no one out there. It's, no one. I mean, if you think Hastings is a boring place, then you need to go check out Ainsworth, Nebraska.
Yeah.
So I think no one saw us crash. No one knows we've crashed. I got to call for help. I need help getting Raja out. I can't do this alone. So I start running through the cornfield, or the plowed corn rows, I guess. And it's raining pretty hard. It's freezing rain. It's raining hard. And I'm running through this mud, trying to get to the airport. And I see the beacon. I can see the runway lights. And I know there's a pilot shack there. They leave and unlock. I know there's a phone in there I can get to. I just got to get to it. So I'm running through the field. And finally, a pickup truck pulls in. And its headlights just shine right at me. And I run for the pickup truck instead. And shortly thereafter, a second pickup truck pulls in. It's like, oh, thank God, some people actually saw us go down. And I start calling out to them, waving my arms. And finally, a voice answers back. And I run to him. And his name's Brian Williams. And he asked me, is there anyone else still in the airplane? I said, yeah, my friend Raja is still in the airplane. And right then, a woman driving to work, her name was Kendra Hollenbeck. She grabs me. And he looks at her, hey, get him to the hospital. I'm going to go out to the airplane. And she starts driving me to the hospital. But she makes it very clear to me the hospital is 6 miles away, but I'm driving on gravel roads and the freezing rain's so bad I can't drive faster than 10 miles an hour. Otherwise, we're going to slide off the road. That's how bad the rain was at this point. And so she's driving very, very slowly, getting me to the hospital. Meanwhile, Brian runs out to the airplane, and by this point, he can't get within 50 feet of it. It's burning so hot. He can't even get close to it. It's burning that bad. So Raja was still in the airplane when it burned up. Thankfully, in the autopsy report, basically when my burns, this is how they know this, is my lungs were extremely burned. I was breathing through the whole crash explosion like I had inhaled the flames and the smoke and everything and all the heat. My lungs were physically burned on the inside very badly. Raja's lungs were clean. His lungs were untouched. And that tells the coroner that Raja died on impact. He was dead the whole time when I was trying to get him out. He was already gone. So I find solace in that very much so, that he didn't suffer at all. He literally He died up the minute we hit the ground, and for some reason my seat broke and threw me in the back of the airplane. There's no other explanation on why I'm alive and he's not. But I'm alive. And so Kendra gets me to the hospital in Ainsworth, and it's just it's a hospital that treats like broken legs and stuff like that. It's still dark. I'm unaware of how injured I am. I thought I was able to talk. I thought I was enunciating clearly, but in hearing the stories from both Brian and Kendra, I thought I was yelling. It turns out I was whispering because my lungs are so burned. My vocal cords were burned. My lungs were burned. I thought I was screaming, but the adrenaline and stuff, you just don't notice things like that. But yeah, I was whispering to them. I was that badly burned. And it was dark out. I couldn't see how badly burned I was, but as Kendra's driving me to the hospital, the sun is starting to come up now. And now, as I'm sitting here, all the thoughts start going through my mind. I'm starting to realize very quickly just how bad a shape I am. I could see my pants. My pants are completely black. I was wearing a polyester sweater. Yeah, that's completely melted onto my arms. And then I start having this horrendous smell. And I kind of thought I just ran through a muddy cornfield, and sometimes farmers let their cattle graze those corn stalks. So either I'm covered in cow manure or I'm smelling my own flesh that's burned. And it's just like those things start going through your mind. She eventually gets me to the hospital there in Ainsworth, and they stabilize me, and they call, the only fixed wing air ambulance. They call Silver Hawk Aviation and say, "Hey, we got a burn victim here. Can you fly up and get him?" And so the pilot on call goes to the weather computer and looks at it and goes, if you called us maybe an hour ago, we would have said yeah, but now it's not looking so good there. So they say no to an air ambulance operation. But then an hour shortly thereafter, the county sheriff calls Silver Hawk Aviation. "Hey, you guys got an aircraft down, one dead, one severely burned." And then they realize they put two together. Oh my gosh, that burn person that we're supposed to go get is one of our own.
Right.
So the pilots all gathered. They were getting ready to fly again, and finally the chief pilot put the kibosh. And I was like, "Guys, we've already lost one airplane to this weather system. Let's not risk another one." So again, they say, "No, we can't come get them. We can't risk it." Those other airplanes that had taken off just behind us in that same direction, they call the air traffic control. Hey, send those guys back immediately. So what they end up having to do is they stabilized me. They had to get me to a burn unit. But the freezing rain is so bad, they can't fly me out. And obviously driving is extremely hazardous. So what they do is they get a county sand truck to make the drive from Ainsworth, Nebraska to Lincoln, which is like a 6-hour drive on good road conditions. They have a sand truck drive in front of the ambulance for a good 4 hours, clearing the road for this ambulance to get me to Lincoln. So, this is all told to me after the fact. By this point, they pretty much put me in a medically induced coma. They had me all intubated. I was on a ventilator breathing for me. When I finally get to the burn unit in Lincoln, Nebraska, it's only then when they realize how badly burned I am. They pretty much say I have burns 75% of my body, all over my head, my face, my arms. But that's not what they're worried about. They tell my folks, my parents at the time, that they're only giving me a 10% chance to live.
Wow.
My lungs were so burned. My lungs were not producing any oxygen. They thought his lungs, they're just done for. They asked my parents, was I a smoker? And they said, well, no, I never was a smoker. And the doctor said, well, he's got that going for him, because had he been a smoker, then this would be a done deal. So the fact that I wasn't a smoker saved my life pretty much. There was a pulmonologist, a lung doctor, and he told my folks, I'm going to work on him every day. And so I have a permanent scar where I had a trach in my throat. And this trach was open in my throat for a good 4 months. And every day for the first several weeks when I was unconscious, he would take a brush and basically shove it down my lungs and scrub my lungs, keeping them clean on the inside and getting them to heal. And eventually, about 3 to 4 weeks later after the crash, I was finally allowed to wake up. And I woke up in the burn unit there at Lincoln, Nebraska. And so there I became fully aware of just how lucky I was to be alive, but also how severely injured I was. I mean, burns all over my legs. My right hand had to be amputated. All the fingers on my right hand had to be amputated down to the first knuckle. So, and all the scar tissue grew up in between what was left of those knuckles. So basically I have like a mitten for a right hand.
Yeah.
And then of course my head, my face, my ears, all burned off. So I have no ears anymore, and my face is all burned. And this is all when I'm 22 years old. I thought I had my whole flying career ahead of me. You know how I said my vision was blurred when I woke up in the back of the airplane? One thing that didn't realize is my parents had asked the doctors, how are his eyes? And they said, well, his eyes are fine. And my mom told the doctor, well, he has contacts. How are his eyes? And they realized, you mean he has contacts? They come back and they look at me again. This is all when I'm still unconscious, knocked out. My contacts had melted in my eyes.
Oh my god!
And they had melted in such a way that when they check your pupils, that they were melted to such a sheen that they really couldn't even see that I was wearing contacts. That's how bad that they got melted on there. They had to call an eye surgeon in to come basically scrape off the contacts off my eyes, and he did an awesome job because my vision has unaffected, and I still see him to this day. That's the eye doctor I go to now. Every time I see him, he gives me a huge hug when he sees me because he remembers that day very much. So
that's crazy.
So I spent a good 3.5 months living in a hospital room at the age of 22, and I mean, what 22-year-old wants to live in a hospital room?
Yeah.
22 years old. That's when you're supposed to be out having fun with your friends, going out to barbecues and bars and clubs and all sorts of fun stuff. And here I am. Basically, my mindset was I lost my flying career. I had my hand pretty much amputated down to everything at the first knuckle. All my face has been burned off, and now I've laid in this bed now for several months. My folks and all my friends, all my pilot friends, all my aviation friends, they never let me feel down. They always made me felt like I was who I was. They decorated my room in Star Wars posters and airplane posters. My hospital room became an apartment, and all the nursing staff loved it. They've never seen someone treat their hospital room like that before, and I totally attribute my recovery as to having my hospital feel like a home.
Yeah.
So I had MTV on all day, all sorts of movies and all sorts of stuff. But laying in that bed made it so where my muscles didn't work anymore. So when I finally was released from the hospital, a good 4 months later, I couldn't walk on my own. I couldn't walk. I couldn't even hold a cup of water. So my mom had to live with me for quite a while, driving me to physical therapy. It took me another good 6 months to learn how to walk again on my own. And then a couple more months after that before I could even, do things on my own, like bathe myself, brush my teeth. And then I was able to start driving a car again. So the recovery took almost a good full 2 years after the accident before I was finally said and done. I had all sorts of reconstructive surgeries and therapies done. So after all that was done, it was around 2003 now where I got to realize now that, my flying career is over, and I got a 4-year degree in aircraft systems management that I really can't use now because I think my flying career is over. So I go back to school, and I remember how back in high school, I was always a computer junkie. I used to build computers up to play the latest flight sims. So I always had a knack for computers. So I went back to school, and I got an associate degree, and it was a double major in IT support and networking. And I figured, hey, I might as well just work on computers for the rest of my career. That's going to be my new job. So I got that. I did it quick. It was a little 2-year program. So 2005, all my friends that I flew with at Silverhawk, they're all getting hired by regionals because around 2004, 2005 was when the regional explosion happened big time. And this is when you heard stories of guys with only 200 hours, getting hired at, regionals such as Mesa and whatnot. Yeah. So I just feel like I totally missed the boat, and And I lived vicariously through them. They would come home and tell me stories of all their fun flying and things like that. And I miss it, but at the same time, I accept that this is what I'm doing now. So I was starting to do I got a job, working IT at a small company there in Nebraska, but I wanted to be involved in aviation somehow. So I eventually got a job with Duncan Aviation in Lincoln, working one of their parts desks. I was a materials expediter. Basically, I would get in the computer and work on the database and order parts for their parts department, specifically the interior, ordering things like gaspers and seatbelt buckles and everything like that. So now I'm at the airport, so I can at least talk about airplanes now. I can talk about airplane parts, and I'm working a desk job. I'm driving a desk. But now that I'm sitting at the airport, I'm hearing airplanes constantly coming and going. And the pilot and me, it's like, I got to go out and go see what that is taking off. So I'd always run every time I'd hear something cool. And thankfully, I had a coworker who had a love of aviation just as much as I did. We would hear something rumble outside, and I'd look over my shoulder. He'd look over his shoulder, and it's like, let's go out and see what it is. And we'd go out and go look at it. So eventually, I just start realizing, it's like, you know what, I gotta get back into flying. So I start the process of getting my medical back, and the FAA makes me jump through a whole bunch of hoops to get my medical back. They want me to see a neurologist since I got knocked out in the crash, make sure all my nerves are working. I got motor control, motor function, and everything. They want me to see another pulmonologist, make sure my lungs are producing good enough oxygen. They want me to see a physical therapist to make sure all my limbs are limber as they should be. And then they make me see a psychiatrist to make sure I don't have any PTSD or anything like that. And I go through all four of those things, pass it with flying colors. And I sent it all to Oklahoma City. About a month later, I get a letter back from Oklahoma City and they say, okay, hey, here's your medical. You now have to go, but for this medical to be valid, you need to go take a statement of demonstrated ability, a SOTA ride is what they call it. And they say, just take this, go down to your FSDO, and they'll have someone go ride with you. And that's all they do. You're not held to any standards. They just fly with you to make sure you physically can manipulate everything that's in the airplane. That's all that they look at for your SOTA ride.
So the FAA was not necessarily, they weren't really against you getting back into the plane then?
No, absolutely not. No, not at all.
That's
so
good.
I do the SOTA ride, and I do it in a little, just a Cherokee. And I don't do it in a multi-engine airplane because I'm thinking I'm not going to fly in a twin engine or anything like that in my near future. I just want to have my single engine back again so I can go fly for fun. And working there at the airport, I get wind of a quarter share in a Grumman Yankee, a little two-seater Grumman, and really cheap. The guys do their own maintenance on it because they got an AMP with them, so it was really cheap airplane for me to buy into. So I buy into it, and I start flying it on nights and weekends. The hangar's right there behind the FBO, so I'd call my wife, say, hey, I'm going to fly today after work. She at the time, she was cool with it. And we'd go fly. And one of my friends who was still in town flight instructing, he kind of started his own little flight school on the side, and he was now up to his eyeballs in students, and he wants to start throwing some my way, and he really wants me to start flight instructing again. And at this point, I agreed to him. It's like, sure, you know what? Might as well start making a little bit of extra money flight instructing. So in addition to my desk job at Duncan Aviation, I start flying flight instructor for fun. Eventually, a student comes in my lap. He's paralyzed below the waist.
Oh, wow.
And he got in with another group of pilots on the field. They had helped him get set up with a Piper Colt, which has just one handbrake. It doesn't have toe brakes. It has just one single handbrake. And they mount an aluminum bar on the right rudder pedal, and they bungee it just below the throttle. So when he wants right rudder, he pushes in on the aluminum bar. If he wants left rudder, he pulls out on it.
Oh, wow.
So they bungee it right below the throttle, right next to the handbrake. And he flies it like no tomorrow. I go up with him and do crosswinds with him, and he had it. He was just fine in it. So I get with the FAA inspector who did my SOTA ride, and he was a great inspector, and he's since retired. But I go to him and say, hey, I got a student who's ready for his private, but he's paralyzed. And he's like, well, he's got his medical, and we see the And this aluminum bar that you built for him, let me see the specs on that. And I show him everything for the logbook for the airplane. He's like, he's happy with it. It's like, you know what? I'll give him a private check ride.
That's so cool.
And he did it. He passed, and he's a private pilot now.
That's awesome.
So there's a fly-in breakfast, and he wants to fly me there as kind of a celebration, but he wants to fly me there as a passenger, not his instructor. So, of course, I go along with him. We're sitting there holding short in Lincoln, and here comes SkyWest leaving the terminal, and they take off. And he's like, Logan, how come you don't do that? And I was like, Shad, look at my hands, look at my face. You know, those days are gone, man. I'm not going to be able to fly a jet like that. I mean, with my right hand the way it is, there's no way I can hold an airline-style yoke in the right seat. And if I did fly in the left seat, there's no way I can get the thrust reversers with my nub of a hand the way it is. And he just kind of shook his head. It's like, you know what? A lot of guys told me I couldn't fly until I got with all the other guys at the hangar to help me get in this airplane. So there's no reason why I don't think you could fly for an airline. And he had heard stories like, they're hiring guys left and right. They need pilots. They're hiring guys with only a couple hundred hours. How many hours do you have now, Logan? And at this time I was like a 1,500 hours total time and like 60, 70 multi. And it's like, the time doesn't matter. They're going to meet me, Ron. They're going to meet me, and they're going to laugh me out the door. They're going to see why I'm not flying for anybody. It's like, well, you at least got to go try. And at the time, my son was only 6 months old at the time, and I realized I will have to someday explain to my son why I gave up on my passion for flying, you know, and I need to be able to tell him that I did try everything possible to get back into flying. So I only applied for 2 airlines. I applied for SkyWest being one of them, and Republic was the other one. And the only reason why I chose Republic is because back in my flight instructing days back in 2000, Chautauqua always used to fly into Lincoln all the time. And I always thought those Chautauqua guys are cool. You know, I like the Chautauqua guys.
Yeah.
So I thought that's the only thing I'm going to apply for. I'm not going to go to Great Lakes. I'm not going to go to some airline just because I want to be a pilot. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to go to one of the better ones. SkyWest never called me, but Republic did. And I went into the interview at Republic, and right from the get-go, I got the feeling that they wanted to hire me. They liked my enthusiasm. They definitely appreciated my experience. And of course, you know, when a group of people interview at an airline, everyone exchanges numbers, you know, find out who got the call, who didn't. And as I'm leaving the interview back at the airport, there's like a group of us right there walking through the terminal. All their phones are ringing off the hook, offering them class dates. Mine never rings. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay. I think at least I know I tried.
Right.
So about a week later, I write a thank you letter to the people that interviewed me. And the very next day, I get a phone call from them. Hey, we want you to know that we do want to hire you. We were just debating on when to put you in class because you made it very clear that you had to give 2 weeks notice. And that was the reason why everyone was getting those phone calls, because they were willing to drop their jobs on a heartbeat to go to the next available class. And
right.
And me, I very much appreciate my job at the FBO in Lincoln. I told them there's no way I can't just leave at a drop of a hat. I need to leave on good terms. I need to leave on 2 weeks notice. And they offered me a class in January of 2008.
That's awesome.
And so when I get to this, when I go through NDOC and get to the sim, no one really questions my ability to fly the airplane. They see it as, we're going to put you in the sim, and if you can do it, you can do it. And if you don't, you don't. And we'll deal with that later. Right now, let's just see if you can do it. And my sim instructor was very patient with me. And I sat there in the airplane. From when I had got into that Grumman Yankee, I had a custom fitted batting glove for my right hand, because all it is it's almost like a nub. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't have much grip on my right hand. So I had a custom fitting batting glove, which gives me a really good grip now with that right hand. And the way I'm on the Embraer 175 and the way that ram horn yoke is, I can cup my right hand just perfectly at the top corner of it, just really good. And I'm able to fly it just fine.
That's awesome.
and they had no problems with it. And that's basically what's going on 9 years ago now. And that was kind of how I'm still here at Republic now. The Embraer 170, I'm very much comfortable in the airplane because of my disability. I know I can fly it reliably, and I've now upgraded on it. And again, I had to relearn everything when I upgraded to the left seat. Now I have my good hand on the yoke, but now I got my right hand on the throttle quadrant, and I can manipulate the throttles just fine. I had to get my finger somehow into that thrust versus trigger, and I'm able to do it. I don't do both at the same time. I get one back, and then I get the second one over the gate, and then I slam them both back in reverse.
That's awesome.
And that's how I overcome my disability.
That's so encouraging to hear that they gave you a chance, and shout out to Republic for not turning you away and not laughing at you. Like you said, it's just they gave you a chance. They wanted to see if you could do it. And that's just so awesome to me. It just kind of shows the type of company that they could be, and it might be a good regional for people to work for because they gave you a chance to do what you wanted to do.
Oh, absolutely. That was, with the way the industry is right now, you hear guys going on to the majors every which direction. And there are some people that are considering careers at a regional. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And that is part of my loyalty with Republic is they're one of the ones that gave me a chance. Not only did they give me a chance, but I'm very comfortable in the airplane. I have a friend who's at a major. He wants me to apply really bad to come fly at that major, and he's on a 737.
Yeah.
And he thinks I could fly a 737 no problem, but I have my own personal doubts. Like, guys, I don't know if I can fly it reliably, whereas I know I can fly the 170 just fine. So jokingly, I told him, I was like, hey, on your next crosswind landing, when you're flying it in, I want you to fly that 737 yoke. I want you to fly it open-handed. Don't grab the yoke because you got to fly it like I do. You got to have your hand open. And he's like, I don't know if I can do that. And I was like, exactly. It's not easy. And the Boeing style yoke, I can't see my right hand gripping a Boeing style yoke. But I need to back up a little bit more. I didn't just apply blindly to Republic after my student. He dared me to apply. I did some research. Now it's the 2000s. There's such a thing as internet. I did do some Googling for airline pilots with disabilities, and I came up with pretty much nil except for one. I came up with I don't know if you remember in the 90s that there was a Brasilia crash out in Georgia where a prop sheared off the engine and was dangling at an angle.
No,
and it was Atlantic Southeast flight. And the airplane crashed and burned because the prop sheared, and it sheared in such a way that they couldn't feather it, and it was half dangling on the wing. It gave them just a horrendous drag that they couldn't keep the airplane in the air anymore. Yeah. The captain died, and the first officer, he got burned really bad, and he crawled out of the wreckage, and several passengers died. And that was with ASA, and he's still flying with them today, and he's a captain now. But when I came up with him, when I found his name and found pictures of him, his head and face weren't really that burned as bad as mine was, but his hand was almost identical to what my hand looks like today.
Oh, wow.
And when I saw that, and it's like, holy crap, if he can do it, then I sure as hell can do it.
Definitely.
And so that was kind of one of the main reasons why. And also when I was working the desk job there at Duncan Aviation, I lived vicariously through the stories of my friends that were flying for airlines, but then also I lived vicariously through reading the internet forums. I was a lurker on Airline Pilot Central. I was reading the forums there, hearing people talk about trips and the airplanes they fly. So I threw it out there. I made a post out there, casually gouging them, saying, "Hey, any of you guys are a fly with anyone with a disability? I would like to hear from you if you know of any pilots with a disability that made it in the 121 world." And I should have known what I was asking for, because I got met with a lot of hate. A lot of guys like, "Oh, you have no business flying an airplane. How can you won't be able to even hit the on-pod disconnect button in an emergency?" And I was like, "Well, I do have another hand. It doesn't say you have to use." I mean, but basically, I was laughed out the door.
Yeah.
But after I passed my check ride, I went back to that thread and reposted saying, "Hey guys, I actually made it." And it was that internet thread when I reposted again, when I resurrected the thread, said, "Hey guys, you guys are laughing, but I actually did make it through training." someone anonymously emailed that thread to the editors at AOPA saying, hey, we need to find out if this story's legit or not. And AOPA contacted me, and they said, hey, if you're ever in DC, we want to meet you. And I was like, well, hey, I have a layover in DC here next week.
Yeah, let's
so
do
they
it.
drove out to the hotel. They drove out to the hotel where I was staying at and met me and verified the story that I had told on that internet forum.
Wow.
And they said, we'll let you know. And several months later, they called me back. Yeah, we're going to do a story on you. And they ran a several page story on me in AOPA pilot in October 2008.
That's incredible.
So that was how AOPA got involved in that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that, because I know it's got to bring up a lot of memories. I know it's not maybe the best thing that you like to think about sometimes, because it was obviously a very tragic moment, but I'm very thankful for you coming on and sharing that, because I know there are people with some disabilities and you can kind of be seen as that they can do it. If someone else can do it, then why can't they do it? So I'm very encouraged with everyone that helped you, with Republic giving you a chance to go fly and just to see if you can do it and prove that you could do it. And you did. And you proved that you could do it, and you're still doing it today. So it's very encouraging for anyone and everyone that wants to be a pilot to hear your story and see that it's possible to be done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not that I don't even mind talking about it. I actually enjoy talking about it, because it gets the elephant out of the room. You know, people see all the burns. Clearly, I've been through some tragic event, and people are polite. They don't want to ask about it, but I know that they're always thinking about it, you know? So I very openly bring it up. It's like, hey, I was burned in a plane crash. Hey, you want to talk about the latest episode of Game of Thrones? Just get it out.
Yeah.
I don't mind talking about it at all, because it's very much who I am.
Definitely.
People always ask me, I bet you wish you could take that day back, don't you? And it's like, yes and no. Because if I could take that one day back, my life would be totally different today. I wouldn't have my kids today. That one day has totally defined the direction my life has taken. I definitely don't get impatient for things. Like we were talking about earlier about commuting. I very much become more patient now in life. I try not to get overworked up over stuff. Patience is a virtue, and I've learned very much that life is too short to spend time getting worked up over things you can't control.
Yep, definitely.
And that's one of the things that I can't take back. So I don't even think about it anymore. I don't think about what my life could have turned out to be, because I very much am happy with the way my life is now.
Good. Well, I'm glad that you are happy with everything, how it is now. And like I said before, I'm just very encouraged by your story, and I'm glad to see that you are doing what you truly love to do. The last thing I have for you is the rapid fire section. It's just going to be a bunch of quick questions, aviation related, and you just say the first thing that comes to your mind. You ready?
All right. Sounds good.
What's your favorite airplane?
I love the Cirrus SR-22. Fun airplane to fly.
Favorite airport you've ever flown to?
It's going to be LaGuardia.
Yeah.
You can't beat the views flying into New York City.
As Drizzle says, only the weak people hate LaGuardia.
That's right.
Yeah. Do you prefer long trips or short trips?
It's a mix. There are days where I long for the shorter trips where I'm on such long legs, but there's times where the short trips wear you out quicker than the longer legs. It's kind of half and half. I do appreciate the longer flights, though. I think I do lean more towards the long flights.
Yeah, I would agree. Would you rather fly over cities, mountains, the country, or a beach?
Oh, beach, definitely. I've seen too many trees and mountains. I want to see some beaches.
All right, here's one. If you weren't a pilot, what would you want to be?
If I wasn't a pilot, I would definitely want to do something aviation related, though. Definitely, I took a tour recently of the Kennedy Space Center, and just walking there, it's like, gosh, I would love just to be a janitor here, to be the guy sweeping the floor in some of these buildings, just to be in the presence of so much really cool technology. That's where I would want to be. I would want to be working somewhere at NASA.
That's awesome.
Either
just to be a fly on the wall, right?
Exactly. That's where I would want to be.
Yep. All right, here's one. Do you like Piper or Cessna better?
That's a good question. Because Cessnas, they handle great and they offer great views down, but Pipers, for some reason, I just love the sturdy feel of a Piper, though, when you make a landing in that. So I'm half and half. They're both great airplanes to fly.
Yeah, I would agree. What's the hardest check ride you've ever had?
Oh, man. I would say probably the hardest check ride I had was my first PC in the right seat of the 170. That was probably my hardest check ride, just because I felt, this is my chance to prove that I can fly this airplane. The check air at the time, he had put me at ease right from the get-go, saying, hey, your instructor signed you off for this check ride, which in my eyes means you've passed, but now you just got to prove it to me.
Yeah.
But still, I felt nervous. I felt like, you know what? This is my defining moment. This is what I have to do to prove to everybody that I can manipulate the controls of this airplane just fine. And so that I felt very much under the microscope, and I wanted to be under the microscope. I wanted to know. I didn't want people to give me a pass because they felt sorry for me. They wanted to see me to go. I wanted them to be tough as nails on me. That way I know I would be safe on the line. I wanted to have that confidence that I was as safe as anybody else. And so if I felt the pressure, and I excelled at it.
Good. I'm glad you did. That's awesome. What's your favorite airport food?
Oh, favorite airport food? Five Guys.
Five Guys. Favorite airline livery?
Oh, man, that's a good one.
Yeah.
My favorite one, I love the retro American, that 7.3 that's painted up in the 1940s and 50s paint scheme. That's my favorite. That
one's a pretty cool one. All right, and the last one I have for you is, what's your favorite overnight city?
Oh, man. DCA is probably my favorite overnight city, just because, if you want to go do anything aviation geek related, the Smithsonian's right there. So that would probably be one of my favorite ones to go to.
Sweet. And then this is the last thing I'll do is I have just started a Patreon account, and part of the Patreon rewards is you get to ask a question. So I chose one person to ask a question, and you kind of answered it already, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it for him anyway. This one comes from Jake, and it is, he's curious about the appeal process with the FAA after your accident, and how and if it was addressed in the regional interview, what all you told the regional when you went to go interview.
Well, one of the things that I did, when I went through the whole process to get my medical back, is, they set forth, all the standards they wanted me to go through. And then when I did my SOTA ride, they wanted to basically see me physically do things with my right hand. They wanted to see me pull circuit breakers with my right hand. They wanted to see me manipulate the radio, the throttles, everything that was about my disabled hand. They wanted to see me physically do. And then when I went to interview at Republic, ironically, it was weird. I was very much nervous about my medical. They hardly ever brought it up. They figured that the fact that I was there interviewing and I had a first class medical in my pocket, there was no question about it. I was nervous from day one. I was in NDOC, constantly asking the check airman, hey, are you guys nervous about my hand? They're like, you got a first class medical, right? I was like, well, yeah, I wouldn't be here if I didn't. And they're like, well, then we're good. We don't care.
Awesome.
That was their attitude. I was so nervous about that. And they put me at ease. They said, hey, you're going to get in the sim. You're going to find out if you can do it or not. And if you can't, well, then we'll figure something else out for you to do. And we'll worry about that later. But right now you're here to fly. We're just going to take it on. We're just going to take your word for it that you can fly it. You just got to show us.
That's awesome. Well, cool. Well, Logan, those are all the questions I have for you. Thank you again for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. I think it is beneficial for anyone and everyone in aviation to listen to this. And I really think it can just help people kind of understand that maybe their problem really isn't as bad as they think, and that they shouldn't be down in their situation, and always be positive. And like we said, whether you're dealing with commuting, whether you're dealing with gate agents, whether you're just dealing with this career in general, just always be positive and always just know that you're doing what you love to do. So thank you for coming on the podcast. I truly appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me again, Justin. It's been great.
No problem, Logan. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too, man.
And that is a wrap of episode number 24 featuring Logan Flood. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you did, don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. We're trying to get to 100 reviews by the end of the year, so help us get that. We're also trying to get 10,000 followers on Instagram and 30 supporters on Patreon. If you are a supporter on Patreon, or if you want to become a supporter on Patreon, there is a Patreon only giveaway where I'm giving away a free subscription to ForeFlight, a subscription to FlightAware, and I'm also giving away some FlightAware swag. So go ahead and support us on that. It helps us create this amazing podcast and even helps us create even more stuff that we have planned for the future. Aviation, have a great day and happy flying. Aviation, that is a wrap of episode number 86 of the Pilot the Pilot podcast. If you enjoyed Logan's story, please follow Logan on Instagram, Phoenix Flood. You can also leave us a review on iTunes, letting us know how much you appreciated that story. And you can check out our Instagram page at Pilot the Pilot, our Patreon, patreon.com/Pilot the Pilot. You can get some sweet swag from there. So go ahead and check it out. We got some great stuff, some stickers, some keychains, and some shirts and hats. And we have a link to a store there as well. So thank you so much for your support, Avination. I really appreciate it. Like I said, almost to 400 reviews. I never would have thought in a million years that we would get to 400 reviews. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I hope you enjoyed the story. Please share this with all your friends. This is a story that needs to be shared with everyone so we can to listen to this and learn from this and just hear Logan's story. So Avination, thank you so much. I hope you all have a great day. And as always, happy flying.